All right, I believe we are recording,
Perfect.
Awesome.
and this is our creative nonfiction podcast.
Yes, welcome everyone.
Yes, welcome. We figured we would get started with a brief introduction of who we are as the speakers on this podcast and go from there about like more of a brief history about creative nonfiction and what exactly that is and our experience with the genre and kind of go from there. All right. I guess I will start. My name is Kendall. I am currently a junior at Northern Arizona University. I am majoring in business marketing, but minoring in creative writing. And I took this class partially because it was a requirement in order to get the certification from my minor, but also I was interested in finding out what exactly defined creative nonfiction as opposed to just nonfiction writing that you're exposed to in school and such.
Yeah. I'm Foster. I'm in my senior year right now, my last semester for a bachelor's in English with an emphasis in creative writing. I have a minor in creative media and film. And yeah, I've taken a few. This is my second creative nonfiction class. The first one I took was with Anai Molina, and it was really great. I had a lot of fun with it. And outside of class, I write a lot of nonfiction on my own, in addition to fiction. I run a little music blog where I cover bands and artists locally and do a lot of nonfiction work there, but I'm excited to apply it to my own life.
That's really cool. I didn't know that, Kendall, you're a business major, and Foster, you're doing a blog. That's that's a cool um,
Yeah,
like side hobby.
that's really cool. Do you want to maybe tell us a little bit about how you got into that sort of writing?
Yeah, I think I had the idea for a long time because I've always loved writing. I started off as like a software engineer, um, which made me not very happy. So I switched to English instead. And I've been a musician for like the past 12 years. So I wanted to find a way to like combine both of my passions for music and writing together. So I run that little music blog. I've been running it for like 2.5 years now.
That's fun.
It's really cool. I gotta mention this one guy that I met today. He kind of has like a similar story too, and he's actually having a concert tomorrow, so you should go. But I guess I can do my introduction real fast. I'm Maeve. I'm a third year at NAU as well, and double majoring in English and journalism and minoring in public relations. Um, I'm not a creative writer emphasis, but my emphasis in English is with rhetoric and professional writing. And I think that kind of shows through my writing a lot. I write very um like more objective and kind of straightforward and not as creative. So through my English electives, um I was interested in taking creative nonfiction just to kind of challenge myself and expand and see what I can do when I put my mind to it. But yeah, this is my second creative nonfiction writing class that I've taken. And when I write outside of class, it'll usually just be like in my journal or poetry every once in a while. So not anything too crazy, but yeah, that's just my personal little background.
Yeah, that's
Awesome. And I think like journaling can segue pretty easily into creative nonfiction. I know there are a lot of other authors who have just published their journals or have their journals published like posthumously, and it's really interesting.
Yeah, I know Sylvia Plath. I'm pretty sure it's hers. She has her journals that were published, and I always thought it was so interesting. I haven't read it before, but I've seen clips, but or like I've read excerpts. Um, and it just seems so interesting. I don't know how I would feel about that because journaling is so personal, and I feel like when I'm in my writing zone, I can just say anything I want because I know it's only my eyes. and I don't need to worry about like making, I don't know, I don't need to worry about any outside force, and I can just word vomit basically and say it exactly how I'm feeling. So I think I would be terrified if I was a person that had my journals exposed to the world. Not like there's anything crazy in there, but just having that kind of like, I don't know, vulnerability. Like I know Jeff Buckley too, didn't his journals get, or Kurt Cobain, I think.
Yeah, I used
It's
to have a PDF of his diaries.
uh, that's interesting. I'm kind of curious what you thought about it then when you if you read them, like what you thought about his journals or like what you guys think of journals being published.
I think it's kind of I didn't read a whole lot of Cobain's. I kind of just skimmed through, mostly looked at the pictures or any like little enigmatic things he did. But I think it's very, very interesting because a lot of the time you can't really understand what anything is about. Like I think it's mostly you have to be the person who wrote it to understand some of the very obscure and ambiguous writing in journals and diaries. Like I'm sure if anyone read my journals, they'd have absolutely no idea what I was talking about because I'm the only one who needs to read it usually. I
Yeah.
think there, I know I'm trying to remember who it was, but there's a older, I think, oh man, this is like 200, 300 years ago that these journals got published from some Asian author. And I think that was the first instance of this really happening, um, like just unedited journals being published. And I remember those being really interesting. I read one of those and that actually flowed well. And like I could understand what they were talking about. But I feel like, especially modern day, it's kind of hard to understand what anyone is saying in their personal writing.
Yeah, and that's especially something like you have to consider with like the rise of social media and whatever. Like everyone will just post everything that's happening on their lives online. And I feel like with creative nonfiction, it kind of is that way, but you also have to keep in mind like you're addressing a certain audience beyond yourself. Like if you're writing a journal, it's mostly just like for yourself and like, I don't know, maybe one other person, like your therapist or whatever, like one trusted individual. It's not like, okay, world, here are all of my thoughts about this one particular matter, which is kind of like what creative nonfiction is associated with. It's like using that storytelling to portray the experiences and real events and like facts that you know about a certain matter. But it's just definitely something that you have to consider when approaching that sort of thing.
Absolutely. But I think that's like my favorite part of so much creative nonfiction is when it's kind of like unabashedly vulnerable and they can just talk about whatever. I think that stuff is really powerful. And it's like if you're not writing something that is very wholly yourself and very personal and vulnerable, then there's kind of no point in writing it unless it's like has a ulterior motive, like it's a piece of rhetoric or something. But if it's like a personal piece, like it has to be you in it.
Yeah. I feel like you two definitely, oh, you go ahead.
I did not mean to speak over, but to laugh at that like it was a crazy take. I think what you said is very true, and you need to be open and vulnerable in your work. But I know for myself, especially when I know other people are going to be reading stuff, I struggle with being so open or being so vulnerable and just I don't know. That's something that I guess like struggling to be perceived or knowing people are perceiving me, that thing that everyone stresses
Yeah.
about. It's so hard for me. So like with this class too, I know when we have writing assignments, sometimes I'll have something and I'm like, oh, there's no way I want to share this with other people. And so I'll just like scrap it and then write something else. And I don't know. I feel like that maybe might contribute to why I write so um like robotic at times too, because I don't know. I like to keep the personal stuff personal at times, but I love and admire when people can be so confidently vulnerable and expressive in their work like that.
Hmm.
Totally.
I feel like you two definitely have like an advantage considering like you primarily write in like this creative nonfiction aspect, like you're majoring in like journalism and such. So your like intention is to describe these like events that are happening as they're happening and like your experiences with them if you were to like partake in that sort of thing. And then I know Foster, you have your pod like not podcast, your own like little writing project, and that's definitely more curated to like your set skills and knowledge rather than just like this is a fantasy land that I made up. Here you go.
Absolutely. Well, I think like there's a lot of crossover, at least with creative nonfiction and fiction in my head. I think it's like you still use a lot of the same strategies when it comes to world building and structuring it. It's just these events have to be real, um,
Hmm.
obviously. But I don't know. I find myself approaching both creative nonfiction and fiction in the exact same way, regardless of what I'm writing about.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I haven't taken a writing class that isn't, unless it's like professional writing. I haven't taken a creative writing class that was not nonfiction,
Hmm.
but next semester I'm taking fiction writing, so I'm really excited to try that.
Nice.
But actually, this semester I am in a humor writing class. So it's writing like comedy and skits, and it's really an interesting experience. But something that I noticed too in that is like we have to make up these characters. We have this assignment where we have the character blueprint, and we need to have these two contrasting characters, and like they have their conflicts and their crisis, and like turn it into comedy. And I was trying to think of what kind of character I should do for my opposing character, and I- the the character I came up with is basically this guy that I used to know. It's exactly like him, like heavily influenced. So after doing that assignment, it really made me think like, yeah, nonfiction and like, I don't know, reality is influence. It's not just in creative nonfiction. Do we use reality and like real stuff? We're still using all those heavy influences in different kind of writing too
Yeah.
to help guide our work.
I feel like you have to kind of put on like a different hat of sort when you're writing different things. Like if I were to write like an essay about giraffes, I'd probably put on like, here's my like zoology hat. Here's all the things about animals and my experiences with giraffes and whatever. Whereas if I were like, I'm writing a book about like, I don't know, dragons and made up stories, it's like, okay, here's my fantasy, like my made up hat. Let's get creative. Let's get wild. Like, let's make up the rules as we go along, sort of thing.
Absolutely. I think like Maeve, what you were saying, like I absolutely do the same thing. Right now, I'm working on a piece, and literally all of the characters are inspired by like family members and people I know. And I mean, it's fiction, of course, but they're all loosely inspired by events and people I know, but just like in a new setting under new contexts. I think that's a great way to transfer the skills from creative nonfiction over to fiction.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I feel like I just obviously it makes sense, the influences that are there, but until I was really sitting down and putting it together, I didn't realize how, I guess, overlapping they could be, because I could easily write a creative nonfiction piece about these people that I have kind of turned into these like what's the word?
The
Caricatures
characters. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
like caricatures of people in my life. But yeah, I think it's interesting. Should we jump into some of the readings and resources we've uh like came across this semester? Talk about some of our favorite readings or podcasts you listen to.
Yeah, let's do that.
Absolutely.
All right, I don't know if someone wants to start first with theirs.
Um,
I th I think one of my favorites was absolutely Consider the Lobster by David Foster Wallace. I've read that piece before, and I kind of a fanatic of his. I really love all of his work. But that one to me, it's less creative nonfiction and more journalistic, but in a way that is still very like hooking. Like it hooks you in, and he has a way of writing that is extremely infectious. And I don't know, I just really enjoy reading that piece every time I come across it. And I feel like the way he weaves all of these themes that he wants to talk about into just the content of a seemingly very mundane and a little bit ridiculous activity Like, I think it's very masterful, and that's something I look up to a lot.
Mhm. I need to read that one again. I read it maybe a year or two ago, so I remember the very basic premise, but do you know is it like a longer piece or a book, or was it just like a short like article?
It's a little long. It's definitely not Flash. I don't remember the exact page count, but I think it's like 10, 15 pages or something. But it is part of like a essay collection that he released.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's always that's something that I do like the most in creative nonfiction is when there is that kind of scientific aspect, I guess you can say, that like educates you as well and teaches you about a subject and then also relates it and like saying this other part. So with Consider the Lobster, isn't he saying like the actually I don't know, I don't want to say what it is because I can't really remember, but
No problem. He's basically like the whole essay takes place at the main lobster festival.
Mhm.
And so he's covering it for a magazine or journal. And he just starts going into the history and anatomy of lobsters and kind of asking these questions like, oh, do lobsters feel pain? Like, are the ways that we prepare lobsters ethical? Um, and even further than that, like who's to say who can eat what, who can prepare what, and which animals are more okay to eat than others. It's like meditating a lot on like the ideas of veganism without really addressing it fully, but just kind of forcing those questions into our mind.
Yeah, that is cool. I remember last year when I took my intro to nonfiction class, I read this piece. I can't remember what it is exactly, and I don't know if one of you might have read it before too, but it's about spiders, and it's this woman basically, I'm pretty sure there was a spider in her basement, and she was really terrified of it, and um, I might be getting it mixed up, but basically she was saying like her own personal fears with the spider, like that experience, like, oh, it was on the broomstick and then it was running across the floor trying to get towards me. And then she was also saying like the scientific background of spiders and why that spider chose her house to live and nest and
Oh
have her
yeah.
eggs. But it was just a really cool piece, one that was very thought-provoking as well. And it's like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be so scared of these little these little scary creatures.
I feel like addressing fears like in that manner is also such like a hard thing to do because like one person can be afraid of spiders and then like another person isn't. So it's like, why are you afraid of this little creature who's just kind of like running around, eating bugs and doing spider stuff? But then it's also like we're addressing that yes, this like as a person, like she has a fear of a spider, but also like she can acknowledge and appreciate the animal for what it does, and even though she doesn't necessarily want it living in her house.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like that's one of my favorite parts of creative nonfiction too, is allowing people to kind of grant some nuance to their views. Like I feel like we were talking about before, if you're just writing a journal, writing in a journal or something, and you're just talking about how much you hate something, if you really sit down and think about it and write it out in a piece, maybe do some research, like you will find that your views are way more nuanced and complex than just, oh, I hate this thing, I don't like this. And I think creative writing or creative nonfiction writing is like such a great vehicle to allow yourself to do that.
Mm.
And you find like so much more in these small things than you thought you would find. That's another reason why I really like some of the braided essays that we've read
Hmm.
and that practice in general.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is the braided essays are always cool. And I can't remember that one word or how to say it, but it's like, I don't know. It ends in
Oh, I know what you're talking.
something.
The
I don't know.
triptych.
Oh yeah, the triptych. Though that was a really cool piece. Like the one with the ocean and the
Yeah.
right? But yeah. One thing that from this semester that has really stood out to me was the the On Being podcast with Ross Gay. Um, he was talking about his book Delights, and one thing he says in the podcast is how when he thinks of joy, he just automatically thinks, or when he's experiencing joy, he just thinks, "Oh, well, we're all gonna die someday," which seems like a very morbid idea and a way to think of something so
Hmm.
Oh,
in this heightened state, do you automatically think like, oh, well, we're all gonna die someday, so that's why it is happy. That's why we can enjoy it.
yeah.
Um, Sorry, I think my internet cut out for a second.
Yeah,
No, you're good.
we
Um,
got the gist of it.
all right, but yeah, I don't know, what did you guys think of that? Or what do you think of um just in general, like different interpretations of joy or happiness?
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. And I've read a few excerpts from his Book of Delights in my intro creative nonfiction class. And I think it's just really interesting. Like I was saying, but like just a second ago, there is a lot of nuance to those. It's not just pure joy. Like the way he describes it in the podcast is something I don't know. It's a little more complex than that. And I think it makes it an even more potent and interesting kind of emotion to extract from because I don't know, it kind of puts us in this like very existential position of allowing ourselves to accept joy. And
Mhm.
I think that's very interesting.
Yeah. And one thing that I find like when you go off on a tangent about something you like a lot, you just like your brain goes from like this fact to this fact to this fact. And I feel like they really do that a lot in like the fragmented essays where it's like not necessarily following the same pattern of thought. Like I'm not like one second I could be thinking about spiders and the next I could be thinking about a time I interacted with a spider and then go from there to how I like different bugs and whatever. You like don't follow that set linear line of like, oh, I was originally talking about this, but if I'm going about my life, I'm just going to continue talking about it in a way that, I don't know, kind of just fragments your thoughts into a certain pattern. And I feel like a kind of like a different, like to deviate from what we were talking about, I feel like Jennifer Battisti she wrote a story called Games, and I feel like they just really highlighted like the fragmented way that it follows like the complexity of an experience what she experienced, and that everyone else can kind of gain this a sense of like the timeline that things happened while also following like her various tangents in certain manners. And I feel like that's something that we have read quite a bit about in this class.
Absolutely. And I think, I don't know, I think stream of consciousness kind of works really well in piecing together like a fragmented essay like this, like games. Um, because even if there isn't like a linear line or a linear thread or chronological order connecting all of the parts of this essay, there is like a thought or a theme that ties it all together, which
Yeah.
I think works especially well for Batisti's piece here.
Yeah, I do think the stream of conscious is so important for those fragmented and braided essays, but sometimes something that I struggle with when reading those at times is if the author is too broad with it, and not really making it more apparent what that common theme is. But also, I feel like I'm not the smartest person to infer what someone is alluding to, especially in writing. Because I also have a bad memory, so I forget what I read so fast. But like when we read the Dear Rain piece, I was struggling to get to remember like what just happened? Like, did we already talked about this? Where are we at right now?
Yeah.
But I thought it was a really cool concept, and I wish I could understand it the way that Nicole Walker understands it, because she was the one that wrote it. I wish I could know or like have a conversation with her, like what her thought process was putting it out. But I don't know. I cannot I struggle to piece things together when it's not like right in front of me.
Yeah, I understand that. I think one of the things that I've come to realize, especially with a lot of writing like this, is like I sometimes I walk away from a piece and I don't really understand any message from it, and I feel kind of dumb because I'm like, oh, I have no idea what this is trying to say. But I don't know. I think there's something to be said about maintaining and like constructing an atmosphere for your piece and really putting your readers in a specific environment um, in a literary sense, even if it isn't as clear. Um, like I think to go back to games, I think it does a really good job with that and kind of like putting us in this headspace that she is in while like we don't necessarily have the tools to connect all of her thoughts. Sorry, I have the
Mhm.
hiccups. Um,
You're good.
while we don't necessarily have those tools to connect all of her thoughts and understand exactly what she's saying, um, we are in her headspace. We are feeling these same things because she's written it in a way in which we can feel them. And I think that is just important as like a literal understanding of what's going on is just kind of not vibes, but just the like this kind of heady environment that writers can put us in when they're really masterful with their creative nonfiction.
Hmm.
I just want to confirm because I can't remember exactly, but Games is the one where she's talking about the tetherball and then her father and her father's team and then like his alcohol addiction, right?
I believe so, yeah. That sounds mostly like what I remember about that piece.
I really liked that one.
Yes,
I remember I was really impressed with the flow and I don't know, just the organization and the structure of the whole piece seemed so great. And it was so short, but it worked so well, in my opinion. I was really surprised by that. But
Hmm.
yeah, I wanted to confirm.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any
absolutely.
other questions about like the genre of nonfiction or just things in general that they want to touch upon before we conclude our session today?
One thing I'd like to say is because we've been focusing a lot more on like structure and all of that, but on like a line-based um perspective, I think if you guys haven't checked out Lydia Davis yet, you should. She's really incredible, and she talks so much about the meaning of words and the how important the structure of sentences is just for it, like giving you a certain feeling, like giving your readers a certain feeling. And I think a lot of the stuff she says in her, I think they're literally just called essay one and essay two is her like big books on that stuff are really fantastic and they've helped me like kind of think about every single word a little more and I don't know stuff like that is very interesting to me.
Yeah. No, especially when you're writing like for a certain audience in mind, you have to like keep in mind like your diction. Like if I was to write something for like, I don't know, 8-year-olds, I wouldn't be like, here are the longest medical words I can use in this context. It'd be like, no, I'm keeping you in mind while also not deviating from what it is I'm trying to say.
Absolutely. I think we have about a minute and a half left here.
Yeah, we got about
um
2 minutes or so.
yeah, let's
I
see.
can, well, unless you guys have another topic real fast, I can share the about the person I met today that I referenced in the beginning.
Oh,
Oh
Um,
yeah.
yes, please
it
do.
was it was really cool. I don't know if you guys have heard of him before. I just heard of his name today, but Don Flemons, he's actually an NAU graduate and he graduated in 2005 studying English. He got a his degree in English, but he he would study ancient literature all the way from like Homer to today, philosophy, but he's very musical as well. Like he loves his instruments. So like today he had a guitar and banjo and basically I feel like I had a good way to say this, but now I'm just not able to speak well today. So I
No
apologize.
problem.
But he was just able to turn all of that like the academic sort and like I don't know, turn it into music somehow. So he's actually won a Grammy and been nominated
Oh
for
no way.
Grammys, like multiple times. But it was just really cool, and he's able to tell his story through his music. So he does folk music a lot. So he played some of his songs for my class today. Yeah, and it was just really cool. I'm sorry, like you guys should look him up. I can't,
I'm
can't
yeah, I'm looking
say
at
what-
his website right now. That's super fascinating. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
he's also a scholar and he's done a bunch of research on Black cowboys and how
Oh,
there's like no books or like no one talks about Black cowboys and what they've done. So he really, through his music, he's able to write songs that represent that time and represent those feelings that stand out from just like a classic cowboy, like a white cowboy,
Yeah.
um, like a Mexican cowboy. And it was really cool. Like he played his song, um, let me find it. Steel Pony Blues. That one was really good. And then a few others, but yeah, he's having a concert tomorrow night at the Kit Recital Hall, and it's free. So if you guys are interested, you should go. Just something to think about.
Yeah.
that is super sick. Okay, I guess we will. I think it's about time for us to
I
wrap up.
I think so as well.
Okay, perfect. I think the only like lingering question I had are do you guys see yourselves using creative nonfiction in the future for any of your projects or future endeavors?
Hmm.
Outside.
I
Yeah.
oh,
Hmm.
sorry, you can go first, Kendall.
Okay. I didn't mean to cut you off. Outside of this class, I don't particularly see myself writing too much in this genre, just given like what I plan on doing with my degree. I don't particularly care about sharing my own experiences. I just want to like create a positive thing in general, like free of my own bias. I feel like that's something I try to incorporate in my writing, so I don't know how much I will particularly be incorporating in my own work about like creative nonfiction, but I'm definitely grateful I took this class so I could get that like experience and like identify like the ability to identify certain things within writing.
Yeah, I agree
Absolutely.
with that. I kind of feel the same. I would really like to think that I can incorporate creative nonfiction and creative writing in general into whatever career path I go down in the future. But I would say for like my experience now with journalism and like writing for the newspaper, um, I have been able to use the creative aspect, I guess, when I do write um articles. Well, not like news articles, but just columns. So last year I did a food review at this barbecue restaurant,
Oh,
and
nice.
I had a lot of fun with that because I was able to be a lot more like creative and show my personality in that. And obviously I couldn't make it as fun or as abstract as some pieces in creative nonfiction are, but just being able to make it more personable. I really liked that, and I think that would be something that I would definitely enjoy being able to incorporate into whatever work I do after graduation.
What do you think, Foster? Would you use this sort of stuff in your everyday life?
I don't know about every day, but I definitely I like with the blog, I'm already doing that once or twice a week. And I have quite a few different like nonfiction pieces I've written that I'm looking to get published soon. So yeah, I like it. It's fun.
All right. Anyone else have any last minute comments before we conclude today's session?
I think we were able to talk about a lot, so I
Yeah.
Yeah,
don't know. I feel pretty satisfied with everything we've been able to go over.
yeah, I agree.
Then I'm going to stop the recording then.